Today I'll show you how to generate and configure your SSH key for GitLab if you're using Linux. For Windows or Mac OS, the process is similar, but I'll link you to a different tutorial for that. Let's get started. For this tutorial, I'll be using Linux Mint, but for any other Linux distribution, the steps should be pretty similar. But just in case you have any issues, leave me a comment in the section below and I will add more details to this video description. So let's get started. The first step that I want you to do is to open a terminal window and simply type in the command git or git -- version to see what's happening. So in my case, Git is not installed, and I'm even suggested here which command I should enter in order to properly install Git. So this is exactly what I will do. I'm gonna be asked for my password. I'm gonna confirm that I want to install Git, and probably in just a few seconds, the entire installation process will be over. Okay, so if I type in the exact same command once again, I'll see now that Git has been properly installed. Now, since this is your first time installing Git, it's very important that you configure a few things. And one of the things you need to configure is your username, or the name that will be used when you're committing, and your email. So the configuration that I will be doing here is also available for you to copy paste from the video description, just adapt as needed. The command is git config, and this will be a global configuration. And first of all, I'm setting the username. Typically, it is your first name and your last name. So this has been set. And pretty similar, you'll also have your user email. Now, this will ensure that when you're trying to commit something, it will work without any issues. The next step is to go inside GitLab and try to clone an existing repository. You're probably seeing this message here right on top. This indicates that you don't have an SSH key, but we'll get to that in a second. So when you're cloning a repository, you first have to get the address. So by clicking this clone button, two options will be available. Now, one of them is cloning over HTTPS. And when you're doing that, you'll be asked all the time for your username and password. Now, this is something that we want to avoid. We want to clone with SSH. And you're probably wondering, what is SSH? SSH is a way to authenticate without exposing your username and password. SSH stands for Secure Shell and is essentially a cryptographic protocol based on a concept of public-private keys. We'll generate this combination of a public-private key in just a second. We're using SSH with Git because it is much easier than typing your username and password all the time, and it's typically also more secure. So what I'm going to do next is simply I'm going to try to clone this repository by using SSH. So this is why I'm copying this URL here. So I'm going back to the terminal. I'll write git clone because we're trying to clone this, and I'm going to simply go ahead and paste it. So I'm going to have this address here. First time when you're connecting to a server, you will get this information regarding the authenticity of the server. So it's absolutely fine for the first time to click yes, and this shouldn't happen again. And the next error that you will get immediately is permission denied, public key, blah, blah, could not read from remote repository. So this is the problem that we're trying to solve. So we don't have permission, and definitely in this case, we weren't asked for any username and password. So the next step that we need to take is to generate this SSH key. And we're going to use a tool for doing that. That tool is probably already available on your computer. So let's give it a try. So I'm going to write the command ssh-keygen. And this is practically like a wizard that will take us through the process of generating this public-private RSA. RSA is the encryption standard that's being used. It's a very secure encryption standard. And the first step is we are being asked where to save this key. So essentially, this will be your private key. By default, it will be created in a user folder, and the subfolder will be .ssh. I highly recommend that you keep it under this name and just hit enter to move on to the next option. The next option is to enter a passphrase. The idea with the passphrase is to protect your private key just in case someone gets to this file. And I highly suggest that you enter a passphrase, because anyone getting your private key somehow without this additional security measure, it will not be able to use it. So highly, highly recommended. Don't skip this step. And as you will see here in Mint Linux, this will be much easier to remember this password without you having to type it all the time. So I'm going to go ahead and enter a password here. Don't worry if it doesn't show up. It's just a normal thing how this is going over the terminal. Now, after entering this passphrase, two things have happened. So first of all, you have this identification file here. So this line. This is telling you that your private key, and it's important to remember your private key, is this ID_RSA saved in the .ssh folder. And then your public key has been saved in the same folder. It is just called differently. It's called ID_RSA.pub. Now, it's very important to remember that you never want to share with anyone your private key, but all the time when you're trying to connect to a server, your server needs to know your public key. So it's always fine to share your public key with anyone. You can even post it on the internet. It doesn't contain any secrets. This is how using public-private keys works. You don't have any secrets in your public key. The server will be able to tell if it's you that is trying to authenticate. So very, very strong way to do this. And none of this information is actually leaving your computer. You're not sending any passwords over the wire or something like that. So in order to communicate this public key to GitLab, we need to get the contents of this file. So you can either go directly in this folder, or you can simply copy the path that you see here. And I'm going to simply use the command cat. This will give us the content of the file. And I'm going to specify the path where this is. And this is how your public key looks like. So all I have to do is simply copy the entire string as you see it here. And in your GitLab account, you either click on this button, add SSH key, or in case you don't see it, you can click on your profile, go to settings, and from this menu on the left-hand side, you have to select SSH keys. So the next step is simply pasting it here. You can even give it a name so that you know why you have created it. And essentially, it never expires. So simply go ahead and click on Add Key. So now your key has been added. If you go back to this page once again, you'll be able to see here on the lower part of the screens all your SSH keys. So essentially, for different systems, you can have different keys that are added and you're still identified as the same user. Just in case your key is compromised or you no longer have it, you can easily revoke any access to it by deleting it from here, and no access will be permitted anymore. So going back to the terminal, let's see if it works now. So the command will be still the same, git clone, and that will be the address that we're trying to clone. And only now you will be asked for your private key. So I'm going to enter my private key. And what's important here, so that you don't get asked all the time to enter your private key, is to automatically unlock this key whenever you're logged in. So if you click this and you have a secure Linux password as a user when you're entering your system, and also your home folder is encrypted, this is a very good thing to do because it will save you a lot of time. Now, Concept is pretty similar on Mac OS in order to save this in your keychain. On Linux, again, you'll have this possibility of saving this information here. You don't have to enter it again. It's just important that you store it somewhere securely so that in case you need to enter it once again, you know what it is. But as you've seen, if something happens and you don't know this password anymore, you can go the entire process once again and generate a new key pair of a public-private key. So I'm going to click here on Unlock. So as you've seen, the clone process worked without any issues. So if I'm going inside the project itself, I can see it is a Git project. I can run a git pull command to see how it is working, and you can see I have absolutely no issues. I hope that everything worked as I've shown you in the tutorial, and that you can now start using Git and GitLab. I would really appreciate if you would give this video a thumbs up and consider subscribing. See you next time, guys.